Good evening. For those of you joining us on Zoom, welcome to Austin College in Sherman, Texas. My name is Kim Snipes, and I'm a member of the biology department. Like 26% of Americans, I have a disability. I am blind. I listen to a lot of podcasts to explore new viewpoints and to stay connected with the world. Last December, I was listening to the podcast on Being with Krista Tippett that featured Gaelynn Lea as a guest. After listening to the podcast, the idea crystallized in my brain that I needed to share Gaelynn's message with Austin College, and through Austin College, our local community and beyond. Austin College is blessed with incredible students that do great work at building communities near and far. I just listened to the podcast, but it was the work of students with the help of staff that made this evening possible. My thanks to Jacob, Heidi, Sydney, and Gaelynn for bringing my idea to reality. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Sydney Verson, the president of one of our newest student organizations on campus, CHAMPS.
Hello, my name is Sydney Verson, and I am the president of CHAMPS, which stands for Cultivating Helpful, Aware, and Mindful People of Service. We're a club that is interested in increasing disability awareness and mindfulness on campus and in the Grayson County. The disabled community in Grayson County is incredibly diverse. So one of our goals is to connect the disparate parts of the community and get them involved on the conversation in the conversation on disability. We also want to give back to the community in any way we can, which isn't possible unless we get to know the community and what it means to be disabled. This semester, we have had multiple meetings where members start learning basic American Sign Language, and we took a walk around campus, taking note of areas that are not accessible for individuals with a number of different disabilities. These activities help everyone better understand what it means to be disabled and how all of the little things, like not having a push button on a door for those in wheelchairs, can impact life. We are a new club here at AC, still in the provisional status, but we really wanted to co-sponsor this event because it brings light to an amazing singer-songwriter and performer who is proof that disability is not a limiting factor. It is my honor to introduce one of the lead organizers for this event, Jacob Moreno.
First, I'd like to thank a handful of offices and people who aided in carrying out this effort. Thank you to Religious Life for your willingness to sponsor this event. Thank you to Campus Activities Board for your dedication to bringing all roofs together for not only community, but for a greater good. Thank you, Sydney Verson and CHAMPS, for involvement in the planning process and dedication to your goals and values. And most importantly, thank you to Dr. Kim Snipes for coming to the Institutional Marketing Communications Division with your story and inspiration. An effort this grand would not have taken place without you. I am pleased to have led such an amazing effort involving so many people and can really feel the roof spirit in the room tonight. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Gaelynn Lea. Gaelynn won the NPR Tiny Desk concert in 2016 and hit the road soon after. She toured 45 states and 9 countries, performing in multiple music festivals and opening for major artists. In addition to performing and recording, Gaelynn frequently does speaking engagements about disability rights, finding inner freedom, and accessibility in the arts. Her music serves as her platform to advocate for disabled people and to promote positive social change. She has shared her perspective on many radio shows and has 2 widely viewed TEDx talks, like we do at AC. She has worked on creating original music for a Broadway production of Macbeth and is currently working on a memoir about her touring adventures in disability advocacy. Today, she is here to share her music and life with us all. So if you would, please join me in welcoming Gaelynn Lea.
Hi. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, everybody, Sydney, everyone who is involved in putting this together. I know it's a lot of work, and I love that you made it a hybrid event. So thanks so much for thinking through all of that. I I am going to play you a little bit of music before I talk. So, but before I start, I just want to introduce where I am and what I look like. So I live in Duluth, Minnesota, and that is the traditional and contemporary land of the Ojibwe people, and right on the tip of Lake Superior in northern Minnesota. And I am a short white woman. I have brown, dark hair that's pulled up into some buns with a blue flower clip. I'm wearing a blue patterned dress, and I'm sitting in an electric wheelchair. And behind me, you'll see our kitchen table because we live in a studio apartment, and that's where my Zooms ended up taking place this year. So I'm going to start by playing a song called Watch the World Unfold. But you should also know that I use a looping pedal. So the looping pedal is a recording device. It happens in real time. It's not pre-recorded. I push a button when I want to layer my violin up, and then push it again if I want to add another layer. And basically that's how I build up all the sounds on my music. So it can either be really cool or go terribly wrong depending on when I push the button. So we hope that it goes well tonight. So this is Watch the World Unfold. Pushing up through the dirt just like a seed, but you're never quite a flower. You feel more just like a weed. Driving through. You wanna know where you are going, but the windshield's always dirty, and you never get to see what makes you think that you'll ever get there. What makes you think you deserve to know? Who are you really? Are you so important? Take a look around and watch the world unfold. Watch the world unfold. Watch the world unfold. Watch the world unfold. Need advice, you have no clue what you're doing. Moral compass it is spinning, an identity unhinged. Where to turn, there's so many opinions, and they're all a little different, and the outlook's getting dim. What makes you think that you'll ever get there? What makes you think you deserve to know? Who are you really? Are you so important? Take a look around and watch the world unfold. Watch the world unfold. Watch the world unfold. Watch the world unfold. pushing up through the dirt just like a seed, but you're never quite a flower. You feel more just like a weed. There you go. Thank you. Thanks. It's so nice to see an actual audience out there. I'm not touring yet because of coronavirus, but it's cool that some things like this are happening where you can see people hanging out in the same room. That's cool. So the next song I'm going to do for you is the song that I entered into the Tiny Desk contest. It was quite a while ago now, 2016, but it's a song I still like to do a lot. It's called Someday It Will Linger in the Sun. And this tune is about how love is beautiful even if it's difficult or complicated. So. Our love's a complex vintage wine, all rotted leaves and lemon rind. I spit you out, but now you're mine. We bit the fruit, it seemed a lie. I'll never know which way was right. Now side by side we face the night, and I love you, and I love you. We walked the pier and back again. It was the most scared I've ever been. You held my hand until the end, and I love you, and I love you. Don't tell me we've got time. The subtle thief of life, it slips away when we pay no mind. We pull the weeds out till the dawn, nearly too tired to carry on. Someday we'll linger in the sun, and I love you, and I love you. There you go. Thank you. And before I do the talk part of the evening, I've got one more song for you. This song I released in 2019. It's called The Long Way Around, and it's about friendships that take work but are worth it in the end. So here we go. When two souls meet and the whole world feels new, shared moments sweet, all colors bright and true, and there is laughter, and there are good things growing everywhere. And I'm happy to be in this place with you. And I'm happy to be in this place. You let it out, You laid it all across the table. What's this about? And you're making me unstable, and I don't wanna go down this road with you. No, I don't want to go down this road. I want to go, but I can't, and I won't. I'll learn to sew up the wounds that I broke open with you. 'Cause I knew, and I chose, and I don't feel at home in this world anymore. No, I don't feel at home in this world. We rein it in, and there is better understanding. Nobody wins if there is flight without the landing, and we learn to keep our hearts in time. Try not to burn the careful ties that bind us together. And I'm taking the long way around with you. And I'm taking the long way around. And I'm happy to be in this place with you. And I'm taking the long way around. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm gonna put my bow down so I can talk to you for a moment. Oh yeah, actually I'll hand you this for now. Is that cool? One moment. My husband is the eternal hand on Zoom grabbing my stuff. Okay. There you go. Perfect. Cool. Thanks. Sweet. Okay, so I thought I would just talk a little bit about my experience with disability and, in a broader sense, disability culture and kind of reframing disability. Because as Kim pointed out, it is 26% of the population in the US has some sort of disability. So it's a very common, I would even say natural part of the human experience. So I'm excited to be able to come talk to you kind of about some of my thoughts on the issue. And then I'm going to play one more song, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. And if we have any more time after that, I can play a couple more songs. Or if the Q&A is going great guns, then that'll be that. But I'm excited to be able to kind of chat with you. So as I said, I was born in Duluth, Minnesota, and I have, a lot of people wonder if my disability made my childhood difficult because I have a brittle bones disease. So it's osteogenesis imperfecta, where about 30 or 40 of my bones broke before I was born in utero, and then they actually healed in like bent positions. So my arms and legs are kind of at this 90-degree angles permanently. They move, but they're still kind of always in that general position. And so I was never able to walk because of this. So I used an electric wheelchair. I actually got my very first electric wheelchair when I was 2.5 years old. So I, in case you are wondering, did destroy every doorway in our house, learning how to drive that young. But I had mobility from a very young age, and I also was very lucky to have a really supportive family. So my parents, their motto was always, if you really want to do it, you'll figure out a way. And so that's a really good motto, I think, for parenting any kid, but especially a kid with a disability. So I was encouraged to try new things. And I actually had a very supportive aide growing up who would babysit for us sometimes. And when I told her when I was 4 that I wanted to be a ballerina, instead of trying to dissuade me, because it was pretty clear that wasn't going to be like the traditional ballerina sense, she said, well, you're going to need to take classes. And she actually took it upon herself to kind of like conscript this ballerina from our hometown, one of the lead ballerinas, to start a class for kids with disabilities. So I was not discouraged from trying new things. When I, once in a while, I would get sad that I couldn't walk. I would cry and talk to my mom, and then I'd feel better. But for the most part, my childhood was just filled with normal childhood adventures. My oldest brother was particularly keen on making sure I did stuff that they all did. So, like, for example, one time he wanted us to all go on a bike ride, which what we decided we would do is we put me on the newspaper rack of his bicycle and tied me up with twine, which is not safe. And we got in a really lot of trouble when my parents found out about that one. But, I was involved in all of this stuff that my family did growing up. When I was in 4th grade, an orchestra came to our school, and I just fell in love with the sound of all the strings playing together in unison. I had never heard an orchestra before, and I remember thinking that I wanted to try. My thought was the cello. That was what I wanted to do in 5th grade when you had a chance to join orchestra. But so 5th grade came around, and you had to take a music listening test to qualify to join orchestra. So I did, and that year I was the only student that got a perfect score. So the teacher, even though she didn't know how it would work, said, I really want to try to help you learn how to play because you obviously have a good ear. And she was very upfront, like, this might not work. I don't know. I've never done this before, but let's experiment. So we experimented with different instruments. Even though cello was my first choice, it was just too big. Nothing I did allowed me to reach down where the bow needed to go, and I couldn't hold the bow the right way, and it just didn't work. So then we tried the violin, but even the tiniest violin was too long for my arms. My wrists, they don't go out very far, and so that didn't work. But one of us, and I honestly can't remember which one, thought of the idea of maybe I could play it up and down, like the violin, up and down like a tiny cello. And so we tried that, and then still was having trouble with the bow, but because she understood all the instruments, she said, you know what, you could probably hold your bow like a bass player does, an upright bass player. So I hold my bow like a bass player, I hold my violin like a cello, and I play violin music. And so we kind of put all these things together, and I didn't realize until I was an adult just how lucky I was to have her as my teacher, because a thing that people might not realize unless they have a disability is that you get very used to adapting. Adapting is just kind of your daily life. You have to do things differently than most people just to make anything work, from like pouring your cereal to showering, right? So for the idea to me to play the violin differently didn't faze me. I thought, of course, I'll figure out a way, but what I didn't realize is having a supportive adult in my corner is actually not that common. I've met a lot of people on the road with disabilities that were discouraged from playing the instrument that they wanted to because they were told they couldn't do it differently. So that's something that I would love to see change. If any of you are going into education, specifically music education, but really any field, it's not a teacher's job to stop someone from pursuing their passion. It's a teacher's job to help facilitate it until the student decides they're no longer interested. She let me try the cello even though it didn't work. And eventually I was the one that said this isn't working, because nobody wants to do something that they can't do. But having her let me kind of direct how we did it ended up in this result where I could join the orchestra and play all through high school, got into folk music, and now I do it for a career, which I don't think either of us were planning back when I was 10 years old, but that's just how it unfolded. As I said, I played classically all the way through high school. I did folk band and Celtic fiddle music for many years. And then in 2011, my friend Alan Sparhawk, who's the lead singer of the band Low, but we also had a side project because he lives in Duluth, called The Murder of Crows. And he gave me a looping pedal and introduced me to this concept of live looping, which I had never heard of before when I was playing with him. So live looping kind of opened up the world of what I could do on the violin and allowed me to create these soundscapes that were something I'd never really imagined before. And I think because of that new influence, I think that's why I started writing songs. I had actually played violin for 17 years before I ever wrote my first song. And so it kind of all started happening in 2011. In 2016, as you know, I entered the Tiny Desk contest, and that launched a whole different part of my life, touring and doing public speaking and events like this. And I think touring is kind of what got me more passionate about talking about disability, because I realized that a lot of the issues I faced, barriers in venues, for example, or just barriers in society for people with disabilities, I realized they weren't just happening in my hometown, they were everywhere. And so it's something that I began to be passionate about speaking about. So my journey for accepting disability started pretty young, but everybody has to go on their own journey when they have a disability to accepting their body and accepting the situation that they're in. For me, as I said, I used to get sad about it right around the time I was 13. I had been told my whole childhood that there were a number of surgeries I could get to straighten out my arms and my legs if I wanted them. So they would break the bone at the point where it was bent and put a rod in there, and then it would heal straight. And then the outcome was sort of unknown. Like I could maybe stand, I could maybe walk short distances, maybe I could even play sports. They really had no idea how the surgeries would turn out. But I had always kind of like toyed with the idea, like, well, maybe I'd want that. I don't know. And then by the time I was about 13, I was like, I'm playing violin. I really like it. If they mess with my arms, I could end up damaging the nerves in my hands. And wheelchairs are getting better and better. I have a good group of friends and a good family. Walking just wasn't like a priority to me anymore. So I think that everybody has to come to that place where they accept themselves at their own speed. And I'm not saying that, and some people never do probably, and that's because we have so many stigmas against disability. But in reality, for me, disability had just become part of my identity, especially when I became, a musician and a public speaker. I realized that I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for my disability. The songs that I write are influenced by my disability. It's really a part of my identity. So I feel personally that disability is a form of diversity, like any other form of diversity, like gender and race and sexual orientation. I feel like disability is just a part of who you are, and it shapes a lot of your different life experiences, and you can't separate it from who you are in the world. I feel like disability is a natural part of the human experience, that it's not negative inherently, that a lot of the barriers we face in disability are put there by society that hasn't prioritized making sure everybody's included and supported. So I, as a person who feels disability is diversity, I also have pride in my identity as a disabled person. Has anyone in the audience heard of the term disability pride? It's not super common in the mainstream, I guess, but disability pride is something that I would encourage you to go look up when you get home. Disability pride is about being proud of your identity as a disabled person because it allows you to have the insights and make the specific contributions that you make. The way that I play violin, I play up and down like a cello. So my cello vibrato makes my violin sound different than if I played it up on my shoulder. So I have pride in my identity because it actually shapes the art that I put out into the world in a very real way. I think disability, I have pride in my identity also because it's given me perspectives that, like both of the TED Talks that I gave, for example, are based on insights I had because of my experience as a disabled woman. So having pride in your identity kind of allows you to just be comfortable with who you are and not have to hide yourself as a disabled person. As an extension of disability pride, as a musician, I am working to foster a sense of disability culture, which I believe is innovative, creative, adaptable, resilient. It thinks outside the box. It's not defeated by oppression. And it's kind of similar to hip hop, actually. Disability culture, which are disabled creators making art despite a culture that hasn't traditionally accepted them. They're like, it's a response to being kind of marginalized, but it's also just plain cool. If you haven't looked up any other disabled artists besides me, I would encourage you to look up like Wheelchair Sports Camp. It's a hip hop group. Ruth Lyon, she's a singer in England, also a wheelchair user. Eliza Hull is another amazing artist. Lachi, Lachi, Lachi. She is a EDM singer. There's people in all different genres who are making arts and creating what we're calling disability culture. It was on the fringes. You know, a lot of us, I don't have a traditional booking agent because I couldn't find someone that would take the time to ensure that the venues I went to were really accessible, right? So you're kind of working outside, but I think we're getting to the point in our society where people understand that we need to start accepting and supporting disability and incorporating it into mainstream culture. So I would encourage you to take some time after, you know, my concert here tonight to learn more about disability culture, to include it whenever you can. Anytime we have panel discussions or big events, I'd like consider, is disability represented at this event? Even if it's not specifically an event about disability, people with disabilities need to be represented there because we're a quarter of the population. It's a really big minority in America. Something that I'm doing in my own work to kind of generate awareness about disability culture and the need for more representation is I co-founded a group called RAMPD, RAMPD, and the website is ramped, rampd.org. RAMPD is Recording Artists and Music Professionals with Disabilities. And what we are doing as a group, we are on a mission to kind of create this resource guide that helps to amplify disability culture, promote inclusion, and advocate for accessibility in the music industry. There's two ways to get involved in RAMPD. One is as a community member. You just go to that website that I told you and take a little survey and you'll get added to our mailing list and you'll get updates. And that's for anyone who's interested in disability culture, hobbyist musicians, people who just love listening or are professional musicians without disabilities. We want to get it to be a wide group. And then there's a separate group of professional artists who are doing music for a living and also identify as disabled. And we're really trying to like say, hey, you might not know of any disabled artists, but look at this group right here. Here's a lot of us that you can choose from and learn from and listen to. And so I'm very excited about that because I finally feel like I have a sense of community in a world that wasn't set up for me when I got into the music industry. I wanted to end the talk on a couple brief insights that my disability has given me that I hope will help you, because I feel like if there's anything that I've been learning this last year with COVID, it's that the issues of disability are really universal human issues that are just brought to light faster because of your disability. We're all mortal human beings, so we all are interdependent. We were joking about this the other day, but unless you like live in a cabin that you chopped all the wood down by yourself and you wove all of your clothes from the sheep that you captured in the wild, we're all dependent on each other for things like even roads and houses and construction, right? So disability, we're dependent on other people, but so is everybody. It's the lens that we view. If we widen our lens to realize that we're all just humans trying to make it work together, that can include people with disabilities in the mainstream. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was disability and sexuality. So I had always felt left out of beauty standards growing up. I remember I used to worry a lot about whether or not I was going to get married, have kids, fall in love, all of those things. And my mom always used to tell me, just keep going out and doing cool things, and eventually somebody will recognize that, and eventually you'll find someone. And my dad just said all men are idiots till they're 25. So those were the two pieces of advice I got from my parents growing up. But when I was in college, I did a paper about a book written by a man named Herbert Marcuse. The book was called Eros and Civilization, and it was a pretty dense book, but the whole premise was that capitalism had usurped sexuality, and what that means is that people who sold things realized that if they made people feel not pretty enough, that they would buy things to compensate. So you buy the next year's clothes, you get the hair treatments that people are recommending, you pay to lose weight at a weight loss group, right? Like anything. So if you make the standards so high, because we all know that magazines are airbrushed, right? And the window of beauty is like, I don't even know what ages 20 to 23 or something, like a very small window of like what ideal beauty looks like in our culture. So if you make it unattainable, everybody will try and spend money to get to that place where they feel beautiful. I realized that for some reason, even though I could see this at work in my peers, I didn't really feel that pressure. And I wondered why that was. And I realized it's because if you have a disability, especially a very visible one like mine, there's nothing you can do that will make you fit that magazine standard, right? Like no amount of clothing is going to like make my arms not bendy, and no amount of losing weight is going to I'm still going to have a wheelchair. Like I'm just not going to fit that mold, right? And so early in high school, I kind of just said whatever to that mold and stopped caring. So I stopped wearing shoes. I stopped shaving my legs. I like started wearing the weirdest clothes. I wore some pretty weird clothes for a while there, high school, college. And I just started doing my own thing. And that freedom gave me time and energy to just explore other interests that I had and not feel so self-conscious because it just it wasn't even attainable to me. I was left out of that discussion entirely. So I kind of went and developed my own sense of style outside. Now, as you notice, I'm not wearing a paper bag. I'm wearing a blue dress that I think looks pretty nice. So I still care about, like, I want to look nice, but I want to look nice on my standards, not on what culture's telling me I have to wear to be beautiful. And so this freedom that I discovered in letting go of beauty standards, or maybe just not ever being included, and recognizing them for what they are, which beauty standards are basically just things that make people have to spend money to feel beautiful, right? It makes people money. That's why they exist. Beauty standards don't exist because they're different in different cultures. They change over time. Beauty standards are just there to make people money. When you realize that, you develop a great sense of freedom. And that freedom stuck with me. And I think that's one of the reasons when I won the Tiny Desk that my husband and I were so quick to be like, yeah, let's try touring. Let's sell our house and quit our jobs and see how it goes, because standards generally are there to like make you fit a mold and follow a pattern and make companies money. So I want you to feel free to express yourself the way that you feel is beautiful and not feel so tied down to standards, because although it was easier for me to free myself because of my disability, that idea really does apply to every single person in this room and on Zoom and anyone who's watching this later. So beauty standards are not real, and you have permission to live authentically and be yourself. The last thing I want to leave you with is an idea of enrichment. So this is the other big insight for me that disability gave me as I aged. And so when I was like 6 or 7 years ago, my grandfather was in hospice. He was 94 years old. He was just ready to be done. He was in there. We have a huge family, like very, very large. So he was not alone at all. We would take turns having shifts, and we would sit with him and sing with him and hold his hand. And we kind of started joking that maybe he wished he was alone for a while because we were there the whole time. But one thing I would do is after my fiddle lessons, I would go, because I taught fiddle before I started touring, I would go and play for him. And I would play hymns because he loved the old time hymns. And so I would play him hymns. And one day I was playing Amazing Grace and he started to moan. So I was worried. I had my cousin go get the nurse and I kept playing. And the nurse came and leaned over the bed to kind of figure out what was going on. And she said, "Oh my gosh, he's singing with you." And I was like, "What?" And so as I kept playing, his singing got louder and louder and louder. And by the end, he really was singing. And that was a very bittersweet moment because that's the last time he ever made any sound. He died a few days later. But it kind of it really stuck with me that his death could have been so different if he was alone in a dark hospital room by himself. But his death, I have to imagine, was more enriching because we were around. And I started thinking about how this idea of enrichment, providing comfort, doing the things that you like, having people bring the things that they love to them, and you doing the things that you love for yourself, living an enriching life, I think that's something that every single person can attain. I'm a go-getter. I love reading like self-help books, and I have a lot of psychology books and business productivity, blah, blah, blah. But I was getting frustrated around the same time that this grandfather incident happened because I realized that disabled people aren't always in a position where they can like set a list of goals and then just check them off one by one with their own free agency. For me, for example, I break a bone and it's always at the worst possible time. I break bones like when I have the busiest schedule. That's like when it always happens. And so all of a sudden your next 6 weeks are completely different than what you were planning, right? And so but I'm not a less valuable person, right? There has to be a way, even if I'm not able to quote unquote succeed and accomplish and produce as much, it doesn't change my inner worth, right? Or the way that I can enjoy being alive. So I created this theory called enrichment, which instead of measuring yourself or the people around you by how much they can do or how successful they are by worldly standards, instead start to look at yourself and other people through how enriching is their life and how can we make people's lives more enriching. So there's two kinds of enrichment that are required, I think, if you're going to include every single person. The first is active enrichment, and this is for yourself. I would encourage you to go home and write a list of the things that really matter to you, that bring you personal enrichment. Some of it might be related to your job, but some of it might have nothing to do with your job. It might just be getting outside, right? Or knitting or gardening or whatever it is that brings you a sense of enrichment. Write those things down and recognize that you can touch those individual things in different ways and try to touch those things every day. So like for me, I love music, but if I break my arm, I can't play violin, but I can still connect to music by listening to it or by writing it. And so I think it's important to be flexible. And COVID, I think, of this skill came in really in handy because I was all of a sudden not able to do not only my career, but all the social things that I love to do the same way, but I could touch them in different ways. So instead of performing shows in person like I would normally be doing, I'm doing them over Zoom with you, right? Instead of cooking with my parents every Friday night, we did it over Zoom. We would cook in each kitchen and hang out and sit and have dinner with them on the cameras, right? And it's not the same, but it's still better than ignoring the parts of you that enrich you. So enrich yourself, find the ways that fill you up and try to touch those as often as possible. And then the other kind of enrichment that matters is called passive enrichment. And this is about people who are in a position where they can't do those things for themselves. It's our job to bring enriching experiences to others. So in the case of my grandfather, singing with him and sitting with him and holding his hand, they actually did a study in Ohio, for example, with people with Alzheimer's disease who were so far advanced in their Alzheimer's that they didn't remember people who visited them just moments ago, but People would do activities with them that they used to enjoy, and then when they left, of course, the people in the study immediately forgot that they had been there, but they marked like higher levels of happiness for almost an hour afterwards. So I think everybody experiences positive effects from enrichment. So how can you enrich yourself, and then how can you treat every person in an enriching way so that their lives have meaning too? Because I think it's very important, especially in 2021, especially during a pandemic, that we recognize that every person has value and that how we treat them really does matter, and how you treat yourself really does matter. So I would encourage you to start to let go of some of this like outer standards of progress and success and beauty, and start to look inside and say, what brings me enrichment? How can I interact with people in a real human way to make their life more enriching? And then I just think we would have such a better such better time in society. So I really hope that this was helpful to you. I'm really grateful to be at Austin College. I think that, disability, I really do feel it's not just a form of diversity like that's so separate. Anyone can become disabled at any time, and if you live long enough, you will probably become disabled yourself. So seeing it as this great universal tapestry, that's where I think we can start to really change the way we treat each other and the way we treat people with disabilities. So I really hope that this was helpful to you. I'm really excited for the Q&A. I hope that you guys have some questions. I'm going to do one more song for you. Before that, this song is called I Wait. And let me get my violin and then I'll explain. Thank you. Just need my bow, I guess. Thank you. So I Wait is a song that I wrote it right around the time that infamous moment where John McCain stopped them from getting Medicaid by putting his thumb down. Now, whatever political, we don't need to get into politics, but the reason that was important to me personally is healthcare is like the reason I can tour. It's the reason I have personal care to live at home instead of in like a nursing home or a group home. Even though I'm a very independent person who's involved in a lot of things, I require extra help to live, right? And so when that debate was going on, I felt very frustrated that people with disabilities weren't being interviewed more, weren't being seen as experts in the discussion of healthcare, because it really matters to us. So I felt like as far along as disability rights has come since the 60s, 70s, 80s, we still have a long way to go because disability is often not included in discussions where I think it should be. So I wrote this song about how disability should be like given a seat at the table for every discussion. So that's what I Wait is about. And then after that, if you have any questions, we can do that. So here we go. you see me way in the back here, I've been waiting in line. It's been a long time, can't get no service. Still I am hoping for a sign that one day things will change and we can finally take our place. That history won't forget us or try to minimize our pain, and so I wait. And so I wait. Did you know that when I get angry, I breathe fire? I can burn this place down. You may not realize all of the small ways I am not welcome, but just take a look around. Still everybody knows that you need a place to go, and living isn't easy if you incinerate your home, and so I stay. And so I stay. I may seem angry, so please forgive me, but I am still not free in this society. How long must we keep fighting for our right to be living? Wrongs overdue for righting. We're all bet to forgiving. So if you see them make claims of progress, take a good look, see who isn't there. We need a seat now at the table, so please invite us, or don't pretend to care. There you go. That is I Wait. Thank you so much for listening, and I will hope that there are some questions. Jacob, I'll let you. Are you moderating that one? Okay, cool. Thank you, my dear.
All right. Just if y'all have any questions, y'all could just come up here. You can raise your hand and I could come to you if you don't feel comfortable walking up. But did anyone want to start us out with any question? Yep.
Hello. Thank you so much for your performance. I really appreciated listening to you speak and hearing some of your beautiful music. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, do you believe disability to be a social construction? And if so, to what extent do you think that we should be trying to reimagine disability, how we should be conceiving it differently in society today?
Thank you. That's a good question. There is, I definitely believe that we should be reimagining disability for sure. Social construction, it's such an interesting question because, yes, I believe in the social model of disability, which is my good friend Lachi, the one who started Ramped with me. She said, disability is often a construct based on the society you live in. And we can all imagine that by, say, you build a house, but you put the door 8 feet off the ground without a staircase, then all of a sudden everybody's disabled, right? Because nobody can get in the door to this house without a staircase. In the same way, I think disability is often like the result, basically, of society not thinking big enough about how to make themselves accessible. Now, I'm not trying to minimize or take away from the fact that, like, our bodies are all different, and some bodies are, it changes what they can do. And I don't want to say nobody's disabled or everyone's disabled. I think that's for everybody to kind of identify themselves. I personally do say that I'm disabled, but I think that we could live in a society where disabled didn't mean as much, because it wasn't such a barrier because society accommodated for it, right? I don't think that we expect people of different, races, for example, not to identify as that race, but do we want to live in a place where it like really negatively impacts you to be born one way or another? No, we want to live in a place where really everybody is welcome and everybody has what they need to get by. And I think that that is sort of how I feel about disability. The place I do feel there's overlap is with aging. I find it very interesting that many people will say to me things like, "Oh, of course you need a wheelchair," or "Of course you need a PCA," or "Of course we need to make sure you have access to paratransit," right? But then as they age, it like they won't use a cane to save their life, or they won't consider taking paratransit because there's a lot of shame. So the thing that I really want to see in my lifetime is removing that negativity from needing additional adaptive equipment, for example, or additional help, because there's no shame in that. I don't have shame in my wheelchair. If I didn't have my wheelchair, I wouldn't be able to go anywhere. I love my wheelchair. You know, people say the words confined to a wheelchair, and I often say without my wheelchair, I'd be confined to the floor, right? Like taking that negative energy out of disability, I think would really do a lot to kind of allow more people to identify if they do indeed have a disability. And then it would, yeah, you're right, like allow us to reimagine what everything could look like. I think a lot about, Ramp is talking to the Recording Academy right now about making the Grammys more accessible. And ramps could just be on every stage, right? Like we could just have beautiful ramps leading up to every single stage because we haven't imagined a world yet where people need to get on stage if they have a disability. So yes, I think largely it's a social construction, but even more than that, it's the negative energy is what I think is holding it back from being something that we just automatically accept and try to mitigate any negative effects. Does that make sense? I hope I'm not rambling too much, but I hope that answers your question.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have a question?
I will move so you can see me. Hello.
Oh, hi. Hi.
So my question is, do you think the word disability itself is limiting or has a negative connotation to it? I've heard a lot of people who are disabled and who are a part of my generation trying to come up with new words or new vocabulary surrounding someone who has a disability. Do you think that needs to change the vocabulary or yeah?
That's a good question. I'm only speaking. Here's what I think. I think that the word is going to continue to change. Like, I think that we're in a specific point in time where, I mean, I'm 37, so I'm probably like 20 years older than you, right? Like, just kidding. But like, I'm 37, and in my contemporary generation, we use the word disability, and we don't use other words because, to me, and I think the root of the word dis is like different or set apart. It's not an inherently negative word. Disability to me means different ability, but I don't use the word different ability, and I don't want to get too in the weeds, but the Americans with Disabilities Act actually protects disability. It doesn't protect other ability or different ability or differing health status. There's a specific word that it protects, and I think people fought really long and hard for the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I think that's why the word disability is important to like my specific generation. But I do think that language changes a lot, and I think that the real issue is not being afraid of disability, right? Like whatever word we use to define it in 20 years or now, like taking away the negative. So when I talk about disability, I avoid words like impairment or suffers from or challenge, even, to be honest. Like I've gotten pretty picky about the words I use when I talk about disability, because although yes, sometimes my disability poses physical challenges, like if I break a bone, every human being faces physical challenges. Like who among us has not been sick, right? I think that's actually a pretty natural part of being alive, is not always being 100% at your best energy, health, whatever. So I like to take out words about that have negative charge, but I do use the word disability. I would not be surprised if that changes, but I think the best way to go about it for you and for everyone in the room is ask the person how they want you to refer to them. It's sort of like gender pronouns, right? Like for me, I remember I did a speaking event once at a college, and it was a very lovely person, so I don't hold it against him. But he was like, I don't like the word disability. I feel like you're so much more able than most people, blah, blah, blah. That was his excuse, right? And I said, I know, but that's okay, but I like the word disability. I use that word. So he said, when I introduce you, should I use a different word? And I was like, no, use the word disability. And when it got to the time for him to introduce me, he went with differently abled, right? And that's fine, whatever. But for me, I like the word disability, so you should use it around me. But if somebody else in your contemporary class or whatever doesn't identify with that word, don't force it on them. I think it's up to the person who is dealing with marginalization to kind of set the terms. Does that make sense? So, and I think the terms will change for sure. I would not be surprised. But right now, just ask. And I think people want to be asked because we make a lot of assumptions. You know, there was a guy, I was playing on the lake walk, which is by Lake Superior, and a guy sat on the bench while I was playing, and he's like, man, if I were you, if I was in your situation, I would kill myself. And I was like, dude, I like travel the world with I'm like, I have a really cool life. But he doesn't know that because he's bringing so much of his own baggage to like his interaction with me. So I think that asking and being open to other people's experiences is really the key in all of this, personally.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for asking. That was a good question. Any other questions? Oh, in the back. It's so cool to see an audience. Good job, you guys. Hi.
I know traveling with a disability can be a very difficult, and I've seen a lot of articles coming out about airlines like damaging people's wheelchairs and stuff. Have you had experiences with that, and how do you like mitigate those risks?
Thank you for asking. And in case you weren't aware, this person is referencing a disability rights activist recently passed away, actually, from sores that developed after she was forced to use a loaner wheelchair when the airline broke her wheelchair, and it didn't fit her right because she had a spinal cord injury. She got an infection and eventually passed away from the infection. So, and that's sort of where that question is coming from. And yes, I have had a lot of problems flying in airplanes, and actually one of my wheelchairs was totaled because it fell off the conveyor belt thing when they were getting it in. So it's a really big problem. And I guess what I mean by people with disabilities having a seat at the table is kind of exactly that. People with disabilities for years have been saying airplanes need to allow people with disabilities to use their chair on the plane, like not have to be separated from their wheelchair, because as much as we can look to those airline employees and say, how dare they break the wheelchair, I have a degree of like empathy because they're forced to get a 350-pound wheelchair in and out of a cargo hold in 5 minutes. It's not actually like easy. I've watched them do it from the plane, right? But that being said, it's not the right solution. The right solution would involve disabled people like being listened to and allowing, I would say, at least all new airplanes, you know, the one coming out being produced now, have wide enough doors where you could get a wheelchair or two on board, the way that we do it for buses, like Greyhound buses or city buses or anything. So, yes, I think listening to disabled people, you could have avoided that woman's death, because this is not a new issue. The problem with not imagining the world big enough to incorporate disabled people is we often don't listen to them until like a giant lawsuit happens or something, where people have been saying this exact thing about wheelchair use on planes for a very long time. And I just hope that that begins to change, because it didn't. That was very sad and unnecessary. And I don't think people put themselves in the shoes of a disabled traveler. Like, if I get to another country and all of a sudden I don't have a wheelchair, like, kind of dangerous, definitely scary and inconvenient at the very least, right? Like, and by inconvenience, I mean like somebody chopped off your legs, inconvenient. I'm not talking like minor inconvenience. It's very much a part of my like body, essentially. Like, it's a huge deal. So yeah, that was really too bad, and I hope that something positive comes out of the tragedy that was her Engracia Figueroa, who passed away. That was really too bad. Thanks for asking about that, though.
Anybody
Any
else?
other?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm a big fan. And I told a friend earlier that I got the email about the event and immediately RSVP'd yes before I even asked my husband if he would watch the kids. So we have a deal about having to do solo bedtime. We try to share the load. Anyway, but my question for you is, I'd love to hear more about when and how and why you made the transition from a musician with a disability to a disability rights activist. And I know you said part of that was in the process of becoming a touring artist and starting to see the problems that you faced were faced everywhere. But I always think that's such an interesting moment. I think a lot of people become accidental activists, you know, that wasn't the plan, but it sort of ends up that way. And I'd love to hear from you about that transition.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, I had done a little tiny bit of public speaking before I won the Tiny Desk. Because I was so frustrated. Actually, the incident that started it all is when I got married, I lost SSI. That's just the way it works. If you marry someone who earns more than like $20,000 a year, you lose SSI. But in order to keep healthcare, there was one program in Minnesota that I could qualify as disabled, and it doesn't involve just like mailing in a Polaroid. It's a lot of paperwork. And so I had to qualify as disabled, and then there was this one healthcare program that I could get in Minnesota where I could be married, earn income, and still keep healthcare. And so I did all these hoops. I jumped through all these hoops to get certified disabled, get all the paperwork in, and I got a call from the county about 3 weeks after our wedding, and I had done all this work. And she said, well, you don't qualify for anything. And I was like, what? Yeah, I do. Like, yes, I do. I just did this thing. Here you go. This is what I do. And she said, no, you don't qualify for that because you both earn too much. And I was like, no, I swear I qualify for this one program. And she's like, nope, you don't. And so something in me snapped. You know, I'm not like the kind of person that drops a lot of F-bombs on people, but something in me, I think, is there's no other option for me for healthcare. The things that I need are not covered by private health insurance. I lost it. I mean, I started yelling and swearing, and my husband ran in like, what the heck is wrong? You know? And because I freaked out, she like double checked her work or whatever. And she's like, oh, wait, you do qualify for this one program, the one that I knew that I had thought I was qualifying for at the beginning, right? But the reason I lost it is because I forgot to tell you. So I said, well, what am I supposed to do if I don't qualify for this health care? You know what she said? She said, I'd get a divorce. We had literally just gotten married, and it was so callous. It wasn't like, I'm really sorry to inform you, like, let me double check with my boss. Like, there was none of that. She just said I would get a divorce. And that's when I lost it and started swearing. But anyway, so that experience really traumatized me, not just because it was very insensitive and terrible that she didn't have her facts right, but the bigger issue was, what if I had just hung up the phone and said, okay, and then actually gotten a divorce to keep my health care because this lady had given me bad information? And I was like, I wonder how many people have like not gotten correct information from the county and then made really sad decisions as a result. So my friend encouraged me to speak at the Health and Human Service conference in northern Minnesota. And that was the first speaking event I did. That was about 6 months before the Tiny Desk. And the reason I kept going, it wasn't meant to be like a new part of my life or whatever. But the reason I kept going is these people who work with disabled people all the time, like that's their clientele, came up after and were like, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea. I learned so much. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, where are you getting your education? Because, like, if you haven't heard this stuff, I don't know why not. You know, this is like not rocket science. This is just basic like disability awareness. And I realized that there's a huge void in all of our education. Like, how many of you really learned? And feel free to raise your hand because I love to be corrected on this. But how many of you learned a lot about disability in K through 12 education? I mean, the most we got was don't be mean to people. But we didn't learn about the ADA. We didn't learn about the 504 sit-in. We didn't learn about the Capitol crawl. We didn't learn about any of that stuff. And I felt like disability has just been essentially completely ignored. And so people don't know. It doesn't mean they're all evil. It's that they literally just have never been told that this 26% of the population, whatever it is, exists, and these are the issues they face. And so I got more involved in speaking then. And I have to be honest, I love educating people about this stuff. I get really excited about recreating disability in a way that's more about diversity than it is about a medical diagnosis, because I think that is the future of disability. But to be honest, if I could just be a musician, because you all knew this stuff already, that is what I would do. You know, I like being able to contribute to society, but I really am an artist who's like, I'm not afraid of speaking to people, and this crap needs to get out into the world, so I might as well help the cause, right? And so that's kind of my transition into activism. And if I ever become out of a job because disability is like completely integrated, then that would be like best case scenario. So that's what I'm hoping for long term. Thanks for the question, though. Any other, I mean, yeah, it's cool to be at events like this. I just feel like someday it would be great if it was just totally something you learned all the way through school, all the way up through college, and it was just covered, you know? Any other questions?
On the topic of school curriculum, how would you arrange like different studies through like K to like fifth to sixth grade or above? Like what courses or plans do you recommend to spread more awareness of disabilities in education?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. I would consider really young kids, I would introduce the concept of disability and as diversity and just like different ways of living through like the books that you read to your kids, through like little assignments that you do. But as you get older and older, I would just start incorporating disability into the curriculum. Like there are disabled people all the way throughout history that could be incorporated in history, right? And in terms of literature, there's people who have written books who are disabled that could be incorporated in the literature. And then instead of just not mentioning that they're disabled, include that as part of the curriculum. Like talk about their disability and whether or not you think it shaped the way this book came out. You know, I definitely think social studies should be talking about the disability rights movement in the same way we cover the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. I think that should be covered. But for kids, the best thing is exposure. And so when you're teaching music class, have some to say, like show my videos, but also show a lot of other people's videos because I'm not the only one out there, right? Like show kids, disabled people making music, show kids plays with disabled people in them, right? Just kind of include it in the way that if you're thinking about your whole curriculum, if 1 in 4 people are disabled, how many of the people you're featuring in your class have a disability that like allow this inroad for you to talk about it? And I think the more people see it, the like totally less like phenomenal it is, and more just like a point of like, oh, let's talk about this because it's a real part of our culture. So I don't have like exact specifics of like what I think every subject. I mean, even like research disabled mathematicians. I'm sure they're out there. I mean, like there's every field has disabled people working in them, and I think it's important to just kind of highlight that when it makes sense to do that. And that's the thing is I I wish that there was a disability studies course available in high school. I don't know of any high schools that have that, you know. I know college sometimes does, but by then you're on the course of your choosing. I want it to be available earlier where everybody gets that education, if that makes any sense. Thanks for the question, though.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have one. What do you think that we as college students can start doing to increase awareness for disability on our campus and then extending out into our community?
Well, that is a great question. One thing that I think all colleges should consider is making all of their events accessible. I really appreciate that you guys got a sign language interpreter for this event, because I think the more people see it, the more normalized it becomes, and they know that they don't have to do a whole lot of extra work to get what they need to enjoy the show. Same goes with visual descriptions, like, you know, how I explained what I looked like right before we started. Things like that make it accessible to everybody. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to make all your events accessible on campus, make sure that you advertise that you're doing it, because that's the thing that disabled people often are faced with, is having to do a lot of extra research to figure out if they can actually get into the event. Can they see or hear or whatever they need to do once they get there? And so I always try to encourage people to write what access is available, like wheelchair accessible venue, ASL, or captions, or whatever, visual descriptions, whatever it is that you're going to offer should be easily accessible on not just the calendar event, but also like the poster, even just a little like logo in the corner, like alt text is another big thing that that any social media post should have, which is basically, in case you don't know, alt text is the place where you enter in like a little description of the picture that you just put on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and it allows people with screen readers to understand what the picture is about and to like have a picture in their head of what you're talking about on the post. Colleges in general, again, diversify, right? Like, you're bringing in a concert series, you do 12 concerts, probably 3 of them should have a disabled artist. And it doesn't have to be visible all the time, but just thinking about how diverse are your events. And then the other thing I would say for college students is just maybe start talking about it more. You know, like, I don't know if your school has, well, you have that disability group that you started on campus, right? Or you're the director of it? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm the president and founder of Champs for Disability
That's
Group.
awesome. That's so cool. I mean, stuff like that, I know that it might, I don't know how you feel about how it's going, but things like that have a lot of influence. I was in a group like that at my college when I was an undergrad, and we were able to secure a deaf studies minor. So we have like, it's an actual course series that you can take now. And then we also did like audits of all the bathrooms to make sure they were accessible. So like, your kind of group has a lot of influence on campus. And I think the one thing that you guys could be doing is talking to the higher ups about why it's important to give these issues visibility. You know, I think it's really important for individuals to do what they can, but then leadership, like campus leadership, needs to be aware of what you're doing and then also understand why it's important. And so I'm excited about the next generation, actually, even though, you know, everybody likes to knock kids these days or whatever, but I feel like you guys are a lot more aware of the fact that diversity is real and that we need to be more considerate of people that aren't exactly like us. So I hope that, that disability just becomes another thing that you're able to address compassionately in real time as college students. I'm excited to see what your generation does, and I'm glad that you started that group. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi. Thank you so much for educating us. I'm not on the screen. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, where are you? Oh, there you are. Hello.
Hi. Thank you so much for
educating us. And especially too, thank you for your music. I can say I was tearing up and I'm sure other people were, so it was really moving. But I wanted to ask, like, you mentioned the piece that was inspired by something. So I was wondering like what your process is for creating your music. Like if you start with lyrics, because I was just really focused on the music aspect of it as well.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, my songs generally start in the shower. About 80% of them have. So I'll be in the shower and all of a sudden I'll have one little line with a melody attached. The melody always comes with it for some reason. Just a little line. So in the case of Someday We'll Linger in the Sun, it was, the Our Love's the complex vintage wine, all rotted leaves and lemon rind. And that was the only thing I had for a while. And so usually I'll get one line with a melody and then I'll kind of it'll just won't go away basically is what happens. It just goes through. It's kind of annoying actually. It'll just run through my head like nonstop until it'll kind of build on itself. So another line will appear or maybe a bridge or whatever. And then eventually enough of the song will formulate. And I always sing it into my phone and I always type it down so that I don't forget it in case it does vanish for some reason. But eventually, once the song has kind of been mulling around in my brain for long enough, I can sit down and actually finish writing it. And it's only then, once all the lyrics and the melody is finished, that I bring in the violin. Because the thing about the looping pedal, although it's a very, very, very cool tool, it also kind of limits the chords that you can do because you have to be able to repeat the chord structure to make it work. And so there are actually a few songs that I've written that can't be looped, and I only play them when I'm doing shows with like a guitarist or a full band, or I do it on a recording, right? And so the looping pedal, I don't want to be limited by that when I write, so I don't even really think about the violin until much later. Sometimes a song that I think can't be looped, like I Wait, that one about disability rights, that one I thought couldn't be looped because when I first wrote it, the chords that the band plays are not repetitive, but then I found a way that I could loop it by kind of simplifying the chords. So to me, the chords are sort of like the secondary part of the song structure. And it's really the melody and the lyrics that guide me. Even though I love harmonizing and I love creating those layers, to me, I think those can shift. But the melody and the lyrics are really what hold it together. I hope that answers your question. And I think it's important, like, anytime you have an idea, no matter how, like, ridiculous or you're like, oh, that's silly, I can't possibly, like, that's too whatever. I always write it down anyways because sometimes you have to let go of that first impression and just kind of finish it, and then you can decide if you want to bring it out anywhere. But trying not to judge what you're making right away is, I think, a good lesson to learn. I'm not always good at it, but I really try not to like preemptively stop myself from creating something. I just kind of wait till it's done and then I can decide, show it to someone, see what I think. You know what I mean? So that's my process. Some people start with chords, but I definitely am the complete opposite of that.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Alrighty, Gaelynn, I just wanted to thank you so much for your time today, and for coming out to perform for us and educate us and just inform us about your life and what you have to offer. I think just going off of like the college discussion that we had, I think this concert and this talk right now is the beginning and the start of that. As well as Champs. And hopefully everyone on Zoom and in person, hopefully this kind of leaves a mark within you to be able to do this later on, either for Austin College or for other organizations that you're involved in. But Sydney or Kim, did y'all have any closing remarks? Alrighty, well, thank you so much, Gaelynn. We appreciate your time.